let's dig into what's happening on page 2 of a Form 1040. So first of all, in line 16, it's asking you to determine your tax. And you do that by looking at the tax table, taking the taxable income number that you got on page 1 of the 1040 and determining how much tax you owe. I've put in a hypothetical $6,000. Line 17 asks you to look at Schedule 2. And what Schedule 2 is basically a worksheet that helps you figure out additional taxes that you might owe on top of what you've already calculated on the first page for your taxable income. Line 18 tells you basically, hey, add line 16, add line 17, and get a bit of a tax subtotal, if you will. Now, in line 19, it's going to see if you're eligible for the child tax credit, and you would enter that credit there. And again, a credit is something that reduces the amount of tax that you would otherwise owe. Line 20 tells you to head over to Schedule 3, and Schedule 3 at the top lists a bunch of non-refundable credits that you might be eligible for. And then in Part 2, it's refundable credits. So right now, what the 1040 form is asking us to do is focus on this top section to see how many non-refundable credits you're eligible for. So essentially, line 19 would be a credit, line 20 would be a credit, and 21 asks you to come up with a bit of like a credit subtotal, if you will. Now, what they want you to do is subtract line 21, your credits, from your total. So basically, this would be the same as like owing some money and then having some coupons. You owe some tax and then you've got some credits. So essentially, once you do that, it'll sort of say, okay, so far, this is what you owe. Now in line 23, you're again going back to collecting more taxes that you might know from Schedule 2, which it would be this bottom part about self-employment tax. But so line 23 would collect more taxes. And then by adding what you currently owe in 22 to line 23, which is more taxes that you owe, this gives you line 24, which is total tax. All right. So now we transition and we're looking in line 25 about federal income tax that has already been paid by you to the federal government. So there's a box on your W-2 that will tell you how much your employer has already taken out of your paychecks and sent to the federal government. The same might be true if you received Form 1099. Some money might have already been diverted to the federal government for your taxes. And then there are other potential forms that you could dig into the instructions and see if there's anywhere else you have already paid the federal government some tax money. You add those up and basically 25D is tax you've paid already. In line 26, this is again if you're self-employed, you might have been making estimated quarterly tax payments on your self-employment. And if that's the case, you would record that here. So this would be, again, tax you've paid already. Now, we're switching from what money you've already paid to the federal government back to credits again. So 27, 28, 29, 30. Those are going to be additional tax credits that not everybody is eligible for, but you might be. And if you are, you would fill in the numbers on each of those lines that pertain to you. Line 31 sends us back to Schedule 3, but this time at the bottom. And these are going to be your refundable credits. So you'd fill out the worksheet down here to find out how many refundable credits you might be eligible for. That would go into 31. And so then what line 32 is saying is, hey, add all of these credits that you've maybe accumulated between 27 and 31, add them together, and these are, again, a bit of a credit subtotal. In line 33, here's what we're going to do. We're going to add line 25D, which is taxes you've already paid to the federal government. Line 26, which is, again, taxes that you've already paid. And then your credit subtotal in line 32, we're going to add them all together, and these are your total payments that you've made. And now the moment everybody's been waiting for, do you get a refund or do you owe the federal government money? And here's what it's asking you to do. You're going to look at line 33, which is how much you've already paid, and line 24, which is how much tax you owe in the first place. If the total tax you owe is large and the total payments you've made is smaller, that means that you haven't yet paid the full amount of taxes you owe and you owe extra money down here, and you're going to have to write a check to the federal government to pay the rest of the taxes that you owe for this tax year. On the other hand, if the total tax you owe is small and the total payments you've already made are larger, then that means you have overpaid this year, and then that means you will get a refund. So you will either have a number in 34, which means you've overpaid and you get money back from the government, or you'll have an amount in line 37, which means you've underpaid a bit and you need to pay the rest of the taxes that you still owe.